Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 267 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and today is a different type of episode. This is the first time I have someone on the show to take a deep dive into a specific religion. And what's cool about this is that our guest, Esther Goldenberg, is passionate about Jewish life, Israel, but also living your religion in the way that's meaningful to you. So her mission is to make Judaism accessible and interesting, regardless of how you choose to use that information in your life. So you do not need to be Jewish. You don't need to know anything about Judaism to actually get a lot out of this episode. And while I'm neither Jewish nor into practicing religion personally, I still very much appreciate gleaning any universal wisdom available from stories, traditions, customs, and rituals in a non-appropriating way, of course. So Esther provided a ton of that throughout this conversation. The big truth that we started out with was, this ain't about you, and this is all about me. And from there, we also got into tons of stories and parables and myths, if you'd like to think about it that way. But also, we talked about how weaponizing the Bible is different than finding the gems that can help people live everyday life regardless of any specific faith. So this was a really fun episode. Tons of stories, tons of laughs, tons of relatable stuff, no matter what it is that you believe in. So keep an open mind, enjoy this one, and share it up. The show notes can be found at untameyourself.com/TT-267. Again, that's untameyourself.com/T as in truth, T as in telling -267. What's up, everybody? I am, as usual, really excited for today's guest. We have Esther Goldenberg with us, and Esther is a podcast listener, so she knows the drill. So we could just dive right in here. Esther, what's a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
So I have a bonus truth, actually, to start off. I've prepared one, but here's the bonus.
Cool.
My name's actually Esther Goldenberg. Gets messed up all the time.
What did I say?
Something else. I don't.
Goldblum.
Yeah.
Damn it! I'm so sorry.
That.
I double, triple checked it before we started. I'm not even going to edit it out because I want people to see me making the mistake and you standing up for it and correcting it. So Esther Goldenberg.
Got it.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries. All right. So I've got a couple truths for you today, actually, because I'm kind of an out-of-the-box person. So truth number one for me is this ain't about you. And this is something that I remind myself of a lot because I need the reminder a lot that when something that I feel maybe is sort of hurling at me uncomfortably, why did they do that? What's going on? Why is this so hard? Or something like that. I need to stop and remind myself, this ain't about you. Mm-hmm. They're having their issue over there, and this ain't about you. It just happens to be like splashing on me. So that's a truth that I try to remind myself of. But at the same time, I'm frequently reminding myself of this is all about me. Because,
paradox.
Yeah, my reaction is completely up to me, and it doesn't always feel that way. And, reaction, maybe, I don't know if that's the right or wrong word. I mean, a reaction is a reaction. Hopefully there's a pause, and then I get to choose how to respond and how to take it and what I want to do with that information. So if you put those two together, maybe my biggest truth is that two things can be true at one time. But those are the things that I remind myself of the most these days. This ain't about you. And this is only about you.
Here's what I love about this so much. I wrote a post. I'm not sure actually at the time of recording when this is going to go up. So maybe it was a month ago, maybe it was 2 or 3 months ago. But and hopefully by the time it goes up, a lot more progress and headway has been made with the immigrant children being detained and being separated from their families. But as that issue was I feel like there was a specific week in June when it was like the most like in people's faces everywhere. I wrote a post to remind people, similar to what you said, to like pause and take a breath and remember that this isn't about you. So, because, and it's similar to your point, but the difference with that was I was seeing so many people post centering their own emotions. I'm so upset. I'm so disgusted. I'm so whatever. And it's like, if we're really here to help people, great, feel that way. But like, let's be posting and sharing and talking about the solutions and what's going on and who we could call and where we can send money and things like that. And let's like leave our own emotions out of it. Like have them, right? All your feelings are valid. Have them, process them, but maybe don't start every mother friggin' post you're going to write with, I'm so upset. It's like, cool. But like, there's people who are way more upset than you are, and this is not about you. So I feel like there's like innumerable contexts for your truth. So I love that that's what you shared.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, talking about that same issue, I actually went quiet for a lot of days when that first broke in the news because I didn't know what to say. I mean, I just like was so overwhelmed with what can you say? And it was finally like at least a week afterwards where I did reach out to my list and I said, hey, listen, you know what? This is going on. This is really affecting a lot of people. Here are some places you can donate. But I also want to point out that it's really important, in my view, to focus on this, to help where you can, but also to focus on the good in life. I said, if we focus on only this, then we're ignoring a lot of good in life. And it was actually that same week that I finished writing my book that's coming out now in September called A Story Every Week. And I'd been writing what it sounds like, a story every week for a whole year. And like I finished when I finished, like I couldn't really control that. And I sent out a list saying, hey, like I've actually got this really good news. And I was debating whether to share it or not. And I did delay my share because I didn't feel comfortable with it at the time. But, we can hold both these truths as true at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you were saying earlier. And I really want to almost overemphasize this for people listening, because these issues that we have in the world, they're just not going to let up. Like there's going to be something else. Like when this gets resolved, if it does, there's going to be something else around the corner because of the volume of issues and population and discord and injustices. So to be able to hold both, I feel like is critical.
Yeah.
To actually live and survive in the world. Because otherwise we're just going to be drowning in despair and overwhelm all the time. And I'm not about that life.
Right. And can I just say, like, this specific issue is new to us at this moment. And there have been a lot of similar issues in the past. But like the struggle of balance between being so brought down by what's sad and miserable and awful in the world versus like trying to live your daily life and then also like have some of the good. Like this struggle is not new, right? This is like something that humans have struggled with since forever. And this is where, like, can I just bring the Jewish content in here for a minute? Like this is where my angle is. This is where I look back and I like just have this memory of King Solomon saying, there's nothing new under the sun. And King Solomon is also, there's a story about him. And like, I don't know if this is, 100% accurate. I don't know if there were pockets in those days or paper or whatever, but there's a story of King Solomon having a note like to himself in each of his pockets. So like in one pocket on one side, I don't know if it was the left or the right or if it matters, there was a note to himself that said the whole world was created for you. Mm. In his other pocket, he has a note that says you're made from the dust of the earth. Mm. Right? So it's like, oh, this is not new. This is part of the human struggle. And we're all just trying to figure out how to be human and how to struggle and how to get through it every day.
Yeah, exactly. I was reading a book by Sarah Beek recently. I really enjoy her stuff. And one of the things that she was saying is, you know, especially for people on any kind of spiritual path, to love in the spiritual realm is actually quite easy. It's easy when we're meditating. It's easy when we're in love and light. It's easy when we're allowing the light of the universe to pour down upon us and shining our hearts open towards each other, you know? But when you are scrolling through your newsfeed on Facebook and you're just seeing post after post about this ridiculous thing Donald Trump said, this atrocity that's happening to more humans, that's when it's hard to love. And that's when it's most important. And that is not a bypass. That is an application of everything that we learn, read, listen to, consume. Like, that's the practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been saying the phrase lately because it's been true of me. I've been starting conversations with, I'm really well meditated right now. And people often mishear that as I'm really well medicated. Nothing against medication. If you use it, fine. But I'm not on medication. I'm on meditation. And I've made like a deliberate choice to really be meditating like my life depends on it.
It does.
Because
it does.
My life is so different when I meditate and when I don't. And it's the kind of thing that you think, well, what, I'm just going to sit still, like, and that's going to make a big difference. Well, weirdly enough, it does. It just does. And so
it just does.
It just does. And so when I'm really well meditated, I'm reminded love is a verb. Yeah, it's a verb. It's it is that moment when you feel that connection, when you're in meditation and you're in that spiritual space. Yes, that's truly love. But love is also a verb, and it's how you act in the day when you're with other people or nature or whatever. It's how you choose to act.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so beautiful. Thank you. How you choose to act. And this is also, too, why I was so excited when I saw your pitch application come through. I also want to let you know, we have like 60 sitting in there right now, and I think I've said yes to like 4 of them. And the reason for that is one of the things I'm so interested is inclusivity. And not inclusivity because, you know, it seems like the right thing to do, because I've always been curious. I've always been curious about other people's cultures and religions and how people live. And like, I have no need for anyone to share my beliefs. And I learn so much every time someone opens up and shares their beliefs. So I don't ever usually do this, but I really want to do this to give context to the people listening. One of the things that we ask in our pitch application, because obviously people reach out all the time wanting to be on the show, is what is the main message you're teaching or speaking about? And here's what Esther shared. She said the Torah, and do I pronounce that right? Is there a special pronunciation I don't know, or it's Torah?
Nope, Torah.
Just checking. Right. I already messed up your name. Let me just make sure I get everything else right. The Torah holds stories that we can learn from today, regardless of our beliefs. Learning Torah stories gives us examples from some of our heritage that we can incorporate those into our lives or not, but there's value in knowing about them. And you had referenced one of our other episodes with Kavitha Chinayan, and you said you heard me remark about the Bible stories and Hindu mythology and how you were critical of Bible stories because they're assumed to be true, yet don't seem to be that way. And with Hindu mythology, I was more able to have a distant view, enabling me to see the lessons regardless of the truth of the story. And so Esther said, that's precisely what I do with Bible stories. I take a look at each one, look for a lesson because there's so many lessons within each chapter, and show its relevance to us today, regardless of a belief in whether it happened or not, or happened that way or not. For those of us in the Judeo-Christian world, that is our heritage, and there's so much to learn from it, just as there is from other cultures. It's not better or worse, but for those who do come from that heritage, it can provide a deeper connection with our own roots. The other reason I love this so much is I'm someone who comes from a Catholic upbringing, and I get so much out of the stories of Jesus and Mary Magdalene and these things, and I have to leave out the attachment to whether or not it's true or whether or not it happened that way, because there's a gajillion interpretations, but the truths and the lessons, the morals of the story are still there. And it's so powerful. And like you're saying, helps us connect with our own roots. And in an age where cultural appropriation is freaking rampant, it's nice to be able to connect in with our own roots. So for anyone listening, whether you're Jewish or not, Christian or not, or anything else, like, I'm really pumped. I'm going to shut up now and just let Esther talk what she talks about. But I wanted to give the context. So let me shoot this over to you for a second, Esther. Where do you feel like starting?
So I want to just pick up where we left off right a minute ago about love, actually, because This is one of the things that I love to teach, is about love being a verb, because there's a really, like, if I had to say that there's one central core prayer of Judaism, if you had to pick one, there's a lot, but if you had to pick one, it's the Shema, which is one line saying, "Hear, O Israel, Adonai," which is a name for God. Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. Okay, even in that short sentence, there's a whole lot to learn. But the very next sentence talks about love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. And that's actually the beginning of a whole paragraph that then explains how you love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might. Because, like, that's kind of open-ended. Like, how do you do that? Well,
it's like, oh, easy. No problem.
No problem. So the explanation is still kind of open-ended. But one of the parts that I really love about it, it says, bind these words on your hand and put them between your eyes. Okay, and teach them to your children. Speak of them when you lie down and when you rise up. So speak of them when you're out and about on your way and when you're at home. So basically this covers everywhere all the time, right?
Yeah.
You're all the time, you're living a life that shows your love of God. So how do you show your love of God if that's the instruction, right? So it says bind these words on your hand and on your head. And if you've ever seen pictures or been in a situation where you've seen some really ultra-Orthodox men or Orthodox men praying, or now some conservative women also do this. They have like a box that they put on their head and they wrap it around with a cord, and there's one on the arm.
What is that called?
So it's in English, it's called phylacteries. I'm sure that clears things up for you really well.
You know what? I read, do you know the author Dani Shapiro?
I think I do, actually.
She writes memoirs, and her dad, I don't remember if her dad was a rabbi or if he was just very devout. And so I was actually asking because it was all through the book. When he passed away, she actually had his stuff, specifically the thing wrapped around the arm. So I really just couldn't remember what it was called.
So in Hebrew, it's called tefillin. So if she used the Hebrew word, I don't know, tefillin. In English, it's called phylacteries. But they literally take a little box and put these words inside and wrap it on their heads. But there's like a more mystical and less, tangible way, which is just like if you have these words on your hands, whether it's like, actually wrapped around your hands or just that they're there, the idea is use your hands to do things that benefit God. And when you put these between your eyes, everything that you look at, when I'm looking at you right now, I see a piece of God. When I'm looking at my computer screen right now, like this is not like God made the computer come together, but God made people and people made like all these things, right? And just to have that view and that reminder, I mean, it's almost like the same thing as namaste, right? Like I salute the peace of God that's in you, but I first need to remember that it's there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
this is a way of showing your act of love with God. Like I've been a Jewish educator for 20 years and I've taught kids and adults, and when I teach kids, it's like a really simple example. If you go up to your friend and punch them in the nose, like that is an action that you're taking with your hand. Is it an act that shows love of God? Right? Or if you take your hand and you put it around your friend and say, hey, how are you doing? Do you need any help? Is that an act that shows your love of God? Right? So it's like you can use your hands, everything that you do throughout the day. You're using your hands or your body or seeing things between your eyes. And so you can just be purposeful about that. And that is not a uniquely Jewish idea. That is what a lot of people who are seeking a more spiritual life are looking and trying to do, right? And we can't always do it all the time. But sort of what I do in out-of-the-box Judaism is just say, hey, if you're looking for this and you're Jewish or you're interested in learning about Jewish culture, just FYI, it's also here.
Yeah, and I love also the way that you described, you call it out-of-the-box Judaism, because I think there's so many people wandering the earth that were raised with some kind of religion and might have been a little more devout or a little more regimented or strict in their upbringing, but they're not anymore. But they long for something, but it's just not exactly what they grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you hear like all these different things. And I'll admit I've thrown the baby out with the bathwater before when it's come to my own Jewish learning. One thing that really stands out for me was 20-something years ago, I was taking a class in Jerusalem. I lived in Jerusalem for a few years, and I was taking a class on Jewish law. And we learned sections from the Talmud on what to do in random cases, right? So like one of them is, how do you make a cow's udder kosher? So the issue in Judaism is you can't mix milk and meat, right? And if you have a cow's udder, then that is like milk inside of the meat. There might be milk in there. You can't eat it. So how do you make cow's udder kosher? Well, I was like 22 years old and vegan. And I was like, why are we talking about this? This is such a waste of time. Don't eat the udder. Don't eat the cow. Let's move on to things that are actually important, you know?
Yeah.
So it was like, you know, a little much that I threw the baby out with the bathwater. After some reflection, I remembered, you know, sometimes people needed to eat meat in order to survive, right? Like they didn't live in the time and the space that we do right now. And this was a way that they could actually live. And they felt very strongly about not mixing milk with meat. And so they put their minds together and they figured out how to be able to do this and still live. So, you know, but I think that some of the rules can be so nuanced and so far apart from where we are right now that it's easy to just go, oh, that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah, thank you. Let's really, you know, sometimes when people say something during the podcast, I see it in my mind as if I've like highlighted it on my Kindle or like in a Google Doc and there's like yellow. So just because it doesn't seem entirely relevant, we don't need to throw it out and go, that doesn't relate to me at all. And again, this is something I love so much is everything has nuance and complexity to it. And some people might perceive this as parsing words or mincing words, but the words matter. Like we're making meaning out of shit left and right all the time anyway. So we might as well just talk about the meaning that we're making out of things.
Right. Well, also we need some context, right? So like one of the stories that I tell in my book and that I like to tell is, you'll recognize that this does not come from the Torah, but last year I took my younger child to New York City and we went to the Statue of Liberty for the first time. And it was very touristy experience. We had taken the bus up from DC. We were stuck in traffic for like 5 hours. We finally got there. We met with our friends. We went to the Statue of Liberty. It was amazing. We went up to the pedestal. We saw the view. We took the boat back, or whatever you call that, the ferry back. And I had stayed really till the last minute because we had to get the bus back. But I was like, oh, well, the ferry over was only 20 minutes and we're really having a great time with our friends. And so I really waited until the last minute to get in line for the ferry, which then turned out to be like 3 blocks long, which I did not anticipate. We get on the ferry. Of course, we'd spent those 3 blocks drinking this giant lemonade. Get on the ferry. It's not 20 minutes back because they start going somewhere else and it's 35 minutes back. And I'm like, oh my God, we're going to miss the bus. We're the first ones off the ferry, literally. And we step foot on ground and we're going to run to a taxi. And my kid says, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, we can't go to the bathroom.
This is not part of the plan.
So we're like running to a taxi, get in the taxi. I say, we got to go to Penn Station. That's where the bus is leaving from outside of Penn Station. It's leaving in like 20 minutes and Waze says it's 35 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. We made it. We made it on time. We put our feet on the bus the minute that it was set to take off, went to the bathroom in the bus, and we made it home. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I think that you've heard of the Statue of Liberty. I think you've probably been on a bus in traffic. I think that you know what tourism is like and all that kind of things. And so you have all these reference points in your mind to understand what's going on in my story. And I actually told this in my book because I wanted to talk about King Og, or King Bashan, who was the king of Og. I don't even remember, right? But like the thing is, if you lived in the Middle East a couple thousand years ago, you would know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You would have that same understanding of like, oh, this was his area and that king, well, he's known for whatever, right? So like there's all these things in the Torah that sort of seem extraneous to us now because we just don't have that same frame of reference. We don't know these guys' personalities from our own experience. We just get like this one little blip about them in the Torah that's like totally uninteresting to us at this point. But there's a lot of other good stuff there if you're willing to just remember that this is the frame of reference for those people who did understand what was going on in those days and that we can still glean a lot from like the actual content of the stories.
I'm obsessed with this point because one of my beefs with traditional religion is that it's antiquated. But again, we hold multiple truths at a time. And so what that requires is for us to be a little more diligent, which is what you're asking. Look for how it relates to you because it does in some way. Where I get a little caught up is when people are hard on themselves, that they're not having a result or perhaps living up to an expectation they have, because our times are so different, like especially, healer type folks who I have a lot of friends who do that kind of work. And, it's not like when the village used to take care of the shaman and like feed them and clothe them and house them. Like if you're a modern day shaman or, whatever kind of healer you are, even like the therapists, the coaches of the world, those are the healers, even doctors, like you also have to pay your bills and your rent and feed your family. And so it's a very different experience, but it's not a night and day. Like there are the elements. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I really love about the Torah is that it's not just stories about people being perfect, right? So it's really like there's some real stories in there of people doing some, considerably bad things, things that we would consider bad now and that they even consider bad then. And that this is just examples. And, one of the things about Abraham, when God gives Abraham the blessing of, this is going to be your land and you're going to be a father of multitudes. And God actually says to Abraham, and you will be a blessing. So one of my questions is like, what does that even mean to be a blessing? Right? and by the way, God says this to Abraham sort of like at the beginning of the journey. And then, we're coming in here afterwards. We've sort of like, I've already read the whole story. So I know what happens. And I know that during Abraham's lifetime, he does wonderful things like he welcomes in guests and he saves his nephew twice. And he's like a really good guy in a lot of ways. But he also pimped out his wife to the Pharaoh in Egypt. And he also was going to slaughter his son on the top of a mountain. So he wasn't exactly perfect by our standards or by their standards. He was human. And yet he was a blessing because there were a lot of great things about him. And truthfully, whether he was even like alive or he's fictional or whatever, all these thousands of years later, we're still like saying his name. We still have religions based off of him. So in some way, I think that he has become a blessing, whatever that exactly means. So I think that having those stories and looking back and going, you know what, like this guy pimped out his wife and almost killed his kid. And maybe I'm not doing so bad by comparison.
That's amazing. But it's also just, again, the metaphor and the story there is so forgiving for all of us, not to let ourselves off the hook, but to go, look at this. One of the greatest blessings that we're still saying his name also did these horrendous things. And here I am also showing up and being a blessing, but also being a terror sometimes, right. There's we cannot control, we are all going to do some harm in our lifetime and we are all going to do some good. And I truly believe we can just do our best to do way, 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 way more good than harm. Excuse me. Way more harm than good. We're changing the show again. It's time to be assholes. No. But it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Quick break in the show to share a little story with you all and invite you to something if you're interested. Since 2013, I've come to know that my intuition is always a few to several steps ahead of my current consciousness, understanding of things, expectations, and life experiences. This is why trust and surrender are vital to my practice, because typically if I'm being guided or nudged towards something, I'm not going to know why for a while. Sometimes it's weeks or months, sometimes even years, or really a combination of all three, as the full why tends to reveal itself over time. So recently, I was saying some prayers before meditating and asking for guidance around this thing that I've been struggling with for a few years now. It's something I go up and down with, make some progress on, regress, and I have a lot of awareness around it. I'm gentle with myself about it, but I haven't quite been able to conquer it. And so if you want to hear more about what that is, head on over to the Patreon page. That's patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed, which is patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. Those of you that listen to the podcast regularly have heard me mention the Patreon. I've actually had it since June. I just haven't put a ton of effort towards telling people I have it. I needed to get through moving in July, get organized, and clear some space for it. But there's actually already a ton of awesome content up there. There's 4 Wild Soul Movement practice videos, 4 bonus podcast episodes, a couple of writing pieces, including this one that I just started reading to you, that I don't post on social media. And that's part of the purpose of Patreon, to be able to have exclusive content for people who listen to the podcast or appreciate what I I post on social media, but in a place that is safer, where we can come together as a community, where you could leave comments and things like that. You can get to know each other, connect with each other from all over the world, and reflect on what's being shared over there. So again, if you're interested in going a little bit deeper than the podcast, but not making a huge investment to do it, check out the Patreon. Again, the link is patreon.com/Elizabeth Untamed. And now back to the show. What other stories do you love to share?
Well, I have one that I love that was pretty well received called "Do You Have a Talking Ass in Your Life?" One of the lesser known Torah stories, once we get out of the patriarchs and stuff, is when the children of Israel were wandering in the desert.
By the way, I love getting out of the patriarchs. Just saying. Keep going.
I'm not saying we're out of the patriarchy in this, but just,
I know. A girl can dream.
Yeah. So they're out in the desert, right? And there's a lot of people. There's a lot of census taking in the Torah because there's a lot of preparing for war. And sometimes people don't look at that aspect. Like the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt. They were going to take possession of land of Israel. There were people there already. So there's a lot of census taking. And so we know from the census taking that there were over 600,000 men of army fighting age. So there were about 1 million people, right? So this is a lot of people coming out through the desert. And they have a reputation because, the sea split and the 10 Commandments, and like people are hearing about this. And they're going through the desert, and there's this king named Balaam. And he sees that the children of Israel are coming towards his land, and he's freaking out. He's like, these people are going to take over my land like locusts. Like, I need them out of here. And so he goes to a local shaman or whatever you want to call him named Balak. And he says, hey, Balak, these people are coming. You got to curse them for me. And Balak is like, I'm really sorry, but I can't curse somebody who God has blessed. And Balaam's like, I'm going to offer you all the riches, the gold, and, all the things that you want. Just curse these guys. And he's like, I cannot curse who God has blessed. And Balaam's like, why don't you just sleep on it? Okay. So Balak sleeps on it. I know, right? So Balak sleeps on it, and he gets up in the morning, and he agrees to go there. He doesn't agree to curse them, but he agrees to go. So he saddles up his trusty donkey, and he starts wandering towards the direction of the children of Israel. And all of a sudden, his donkey stops and throws Balak off the donkey. And Balak is like, what the heck? And he beats his donkey. He says, we got to go. What Balak doesn't know in the meantime is the reason why the donkey had stopped is because he saw the angel of death in front of him, ready to slay Balak. Okay, so they're continuing on their journey, and the donkey's walking along, and Balak is happily riding on him, blah, blah, blah. And they come to a vineyard where it's like a narrow path or something between a vineyard. And the donkey stops. He tries to go off course, and he ends up rubbing Balak against the fence or whatever it is. He gets hurt, and he beats his donkey. He's like, what are you, crazy donkey? You're hurting me. Because he doesn't know that the angel of death. So then they carry on, and they get to a place where there's no passage, and the angel of death is right before them, and the donkey has nowhere to go, so he stops. Okay? And Balak is like, crazy donkey, what are you doing? And he beats the donkey. And then God opens up the donkey's mouth. And the donkey says to Balak, have I not been your trusted donkey all this time? Do I not take you places? Don't you rely on me? And then God opens up Balak's eyes, and Balak sees the angel of death there and realizes that the donkey had saved his life. And then the story goes on, and Balak gets there, and he doesn't end up cursing the children of Israel. But the point of my story in this is that, was the donkey talking? I don't know. But I also don't care, right? I can hear a story where the donkey was talking. What I care about is this. We all have a talking ass in our life. We all have somebody who is trying to help us be on the path of safety, and we treat them like shit. We kick them, and we say, hey, why are you doing this to me? Because we can't see what our donkey sees. And our donkey still tries to help us because that's how faithful that they are. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to help us do this. Or I shouldn't say we all have a talking ass in our life, but maybe we all should or could or would like to. And does that have anything to do with the Torah story? Well, it taught me something, and I don't even care if the donkey was talking. But, I would like to propose that in a story where a donkey can see the angel of death, probably a human could see the angel of death, right? So Balak was so closed off to that he needed a talking donkey to open his eyes. And also, we also get in these situations where something that could be really clear. We just don't see it for a while. And then all of a sudden our eyes are open and we're like, whoa, right? And it's a totally different experience when we get to see that. And that's something I think that we've all experienced, probably without an actual donkey, but an experience that we can relate to.
I mean, you're a mom. A lot of moms are talking donkeys.
Yes.
As you were saying, we all have a talking donkey in my life. I'm like, yep, mine is Margaret D'Alto. She is constantly trying to steer me out of the way of danger, and I'm walking into it face first, only later on to be like, girl, you were right. No, I don't call my mom girl. But
well, you could just start calling her talking ass. That'll probably go over really well.
I do not think she would do. I call her up later. Way. Mom, I just want to let you know I appreciate you so much. You are my talking ass.
Let me know how that goes.
I will. It'll be great. But again, beautiful. And for people listening, I want to overemphasize how throughout the telling of the story and the reflecting and the extrapolating of the lesson, you're going, was Donkey really talking? I don't care. I think what so many people's barrier to a higher understanding and also an easier life is they want to hone in on that's ridiculous. Donkeys don't talk. Who gives a shit?
That's right.
Get the moral of let the lesson. We don't care. We don't care about that. Yeah. Get the lesson. Get the metaphor.
And the thing that I like personally about learning these things from the Torah is that it's my heritage. So that doesn't make it any better or worse than anybody. It just makes it really more, it feels like my family history. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Chicago. And I had a great uncle, Uncle Ed. He was like the patriarch of the family. He died even before I was born. I never met the man, heard a lot of stories about Uncle Ed. And one of the stories that I heard is he used to love to go to the park and feed the squirrels. Okay, so this is a really bad idea for anybody listening. Do not try this at home. Don't go and put your fingers right up to a squirrel's mouth because it's just not safe. So a squirrel would bite him. Come get the nuts or whatever, but bite him by accident. So Uncle Ed would have to go and get the rabies shot, right? So you would think, don't do this, right? So here's the thing, like now now you, thanks to my Uncle Ed, there's a whole population of people who are not feeding rabid squirrels with their bare hands, right? Now, hopefully most people were already not doing that, but I'm saying we all have these family stories, right? Uncle Ed fed the squirrels and whatever else the family stories were, you learn from that, oh, don't do that because Uncle Ed used to feed the squirrels, or don't do that because, you can probably fill in that blank right there with your story. And that's what I view as the Torah is well, this already happened. And let me just see, let me just check if this happened in my family. Let me just check what happened. Doesn't mean that's the way I'm going to go right now. Right. But let me just check and see if I know anything from there.
Yeah. I love that. It's a resource. It's like a treasure chest to be for precedent.
Yeah.
If you will.
Yeah.
Spiritual precedent.
I love your analogy of the treasure chest. That's one of the things that I use with out of the box Judaism is imagine you got this treasure chest, this inheritance from your family. Mm-hmm. It's been sitting in the attic and you haven't been paying attention to it. And you can pull these things out one at a time. And the truth is, you might find an old moth-eaten sweater in there and go, you know what, this time for this to go in the garbage. I'm not going to use it anymore. Or you might find some lovely piece of jewelry and you might go, this is really gorgeous. Totally doesn't go with my style. I'm going to hang it up on the wall. Right? Or you might say, this is really gorgeous. I'm going to save it for my children. It's not for me. So you don't have to just keep everything and use everything that you find, but it's kind of worth knowing what's in there.
What I appreciate a lot about everything you're saying is that there is a prioritization of reverence, respect, curiosity, and finding the value rather than dismissing something before you at least do some investigation. And I think our culture is, because there's such a volume of information available to us, especially digitally, I think people are so willing to dismiss something without doing just a little bit of diligence, a little bit of investigation to just go, is there even one gem here? Right. And even what you just said, it's so brilliant, the things you're saying. Hey, this necklace isn't for me. I'm going to hang it up. I'm not going to wear it. I'm not going to use it the way it was intended, but I can still use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And there are some things that we can use, right? So in this week's Torah portion, because there's one Torah portion read every week, right? Torah is really long. So in this week's Torah portion, there's a story that's called the Daughters of Zelophehad. So use try saying Zelophehad. So there's a guy who had a long name, Zelophehad, and he had 5 daughters, and he died and he had no sons. Okay, so think about this. Like, this is, first of all, a really strange occurrence, right? Because, like, back in those days, men had multiple wives or multiple breeding partners or whatever you want to call them. And he had 5 daughters and no sons. And the daughters came to Moses and said, hey, you know, we're talking about divvying up property right now. And the property goes, like, to the men of the tribes. And then they pass that along to their sons, obviously. And our father was, like, a good man. And he has no sons to pass this along to. And why should our family's land go to somebody else? Like, why would our tribal land go to somebody else instead of going to his daughters? And from that, like, from them speaking up, new rules were made. Like, this was, you know, unprecedented, literally unprecedented, where Moses said, yeah, you know what? You're right. Actually, we should keep the land. And they made a new rule. If a man dies and he has no sons, the land goes to his daughters. And then later on, like in next week's Torah portion, this is visited again. And some of the men are like, well, hey, but these women are going to get married, and these women are in our tribe, and they can marry some guy from another tribe, and then our land goes to another tribe. So then another rule is made saying, like, okay, these women, like, if a woman isn't inheriting land, then she can only marry within her tribe so that the land stays in the tribe, because that's the point. So, like, these days, we would hopefully do that rule differently, right? But in those days, that was, like, revolutionary.
Yeah.
So
again,
like, we can still take that gem. Yeah.
Honoring and respecting the times, which is cool. So what made you, I know you said you've been doing this work for a while, and I know because I was reading your bio, which we'll share that stuff. People already heard it in the intro, even though I didn't say it while you were on here. I know you've been teaching kids and stuff like that too for a really long time. What made you decide to write the book? I'm always curious of people's, like, that impetus to do the big thing.
Yeah. So I tend to jump off of cliffs sometimes.
I have no idea what that feels like.
Right. So last year I actually started writing the Out of the Box Bat Mitzvah, a guide to creating a meaningful milestone. I started writing it on August 1st, and I published it on September 9th, and and I had my pub date. I already knew it was going to be September 9th, 2017. What I didn't know was that was 40 days. Which is a really significant number.
That is cool. And did you intentionally, that's right around the high holidays as well, right?
Yeah, I actually intentionally published it on September 9th because of a conference that I was going to, and I was hoping it would be a bestseller, and it was a bestseller when I got to the conference, and I could say, oh, I'm the best-selling author of Out of the Box Bat Mitzvah, right? So, like, there was some planning around that, but it came out right before the holidays. And then my next book, A Story Every Week, is intentionally coming out right before the holidays because, like I said, there's a Torah portion every week, and it starts with the holiday of Simchat Torah, which is literally the celebration of the Torah, which is a day on which you finish reading the Torah, and that same day you start it over again. So there's no pause. So the book will start A Story Every Week with, like, the first week's Torah portion, the second week's Torah portion. Anybody who would care to read it in order would, have it in time for that. So I just did that because I spend a lot of time teaching bar and bat mitzvah students and families. And a lot of times families will come to me saying, oh my gosh, my kid is 11 and we've never done anything Jewish. We eat bagels and that's all. And we don't do anything right. And, my kids, like, all of her friends are having a bat mitzvah. What am I going to do? And so I love everybody who I work with, but these are sort of my favorite people to work with because my ultimate message is you are doing everything right. Whatever it is you're doing, you're already right. You're not wrong. It's only bagels, whatever it is. So, and then I help them learn about their heritage. And most of the time they don't do anything different, except they have this sort of different point of view of, like, oh my gosh, that happens in my heritage. This is like, and I'll get people who just have, like, understandable ignorance. But, like, I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and I do work with people remotely sometimes. But, like, Washington, D.C. is a really hyper-educated area.
Yeah.
So I get, like, a lot of parents who are, like, really, really super educated, and they're not super educated in their Judaism. And so they have this, like, bad feeling about themselves. Like, I know everything about policy or whatever it is that they know everything about. But, like, when I say to them something like, hey, do you want to include this prayer in your child's bat mitzvah? It's hallelujah, and it sounds really nice, and it's upbeat, and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, yeah, I don't want to have something that's hallelujah. That sounds too Christian to me. I'm like, well, actually, just so you know, hallelujah is a Hebrew word. It comes from hallel and yah, and hallel means praise, and yah means God. So even though it's now also an English word, it's a pretty Jewish word because it's Hebrew and it means praise God. And there's I grew up in America too, in a very secular house, and I feel like I'm very much indoctrinated in Christian society, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you don't know these things unless you learn them, right? How would you know something if you didn't learn it? So I love, bringing this light and this information to people. I don't care what they do with it, but it's just so nice to know sometimes,
I love that. I love that perspective. It's just so nice to know. And, to come back to the thing that you were saying earlier when you shared the story about the tourist and the bus and the ferry and all the things, I'm just noticing we are always looking for the shared context. We're always looking for the thing that we can relate to in the story, because as you were saying, you live in Washington, D.C., and you help people with bar and bat mitzvahs. I'm immediately thinking of back in my mid-20s, I lived in the D.C. area, and I was dating someone who coached a 7th grade girls basketball team. And we went to one of their bat mitzvahs, and it was amazing. It was in Tenleytown area. I forget exactly where, but it was awesome. And I was like, man, this is cool and this is also something I've always appreciated about Judaism. I know that a lot of, I was Catholic, we have sacraments, we have Holy Communions, we have confirmations and things like that. But I feel like Judaism makes a much bigger deal about the rite of passage aspect of the experience. And at least this was my experience. Someone listening, maybe your family, the way they approached your first Holy Communion or your confirmation if you were Catholic or whatever, maybe there was more of a rite of passage to it. But I feel like there's a much bigger, from the Jewish friends I've had growing up and the exposure I've had to it, which is minimal, I just feel like there's more of an emphasis on that you are passing into adulthood versus that you're checking a box. This is your sacrament, and this is a requirement. And I feel like one of the reasons why our culture is so, well, let's be just mild about it and call it down in the dumps, is because people's identities don't get honored and respected and carried through these important phases and stages of life.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about rite of passage because first of all, it's it depends on where and when you live. This is so weird, but it was literally yesterday that I realized that I was the first person in my family to have a bat mitzvah. Oh, no. My bat mitzvah was, 30 years ago. So it took me a while to realize that I was the first person in my family to have a bat mitzvah. And a lot of that was just because women didn't have bat mitzvah celebrations, right? Until recently. And even bar mitzvah celebrations for a boy didn't used to be what they were right now. And what I'll often tell people is what you need to do, the absolute requirement to become a bar mitzvah or to become a bat mitzvah is to turn 13 if you're a boy, 12 if you're a girl, or 12 or 13 if you're a girl. Different people hold different customs. So it's I liken it to the right to vote. So if you turn 18 in America, you have the right to vote. Whether you go vote or not, and you should, by the way, but whether you go vote or not, you still have that right. Just because you woke up the day after your 18th birthday, you turned 18, you now have that right. And the same is true in Judaism. When you become a bar bat mitzvah, you wake up that day, you are now a part of the adult Jewish community. And that means, that doesn't mean you have to go get a job or go get married or anything like that. What it ultimately means is that you have some privileges that are privileges to adults that kids aren't allowed to do. So, for example, you can count in a minyan, which is a quorum of 10 adults, that you're supposed to say certain prayers only if you have a group around you. So this is one of the things that I really admire about Jewish custom is that there's something called the Mourners Kaddish, which is a prayer that you say when you're in mourning. If you've lost a parent or somebody else close to you, people will recite Mourners Kaddish. And you're not supposed to recite Mourners Kaddish unless you're in a minyan, unless you're in a group of 10 or more people. And think about how that supports the mourning person right away, right? So once you become a bar bat mitzvah, you can be a part of that group of 10 that the prayers can be said in. And you can also say the blessings for Torah reading. You now count, and you can be the public prayer leader. Whereas if you were a child, your prayers can't really represent other people because you're just a child, right? But if you're an adult, when you say the prayers, it can represent other people. So that's really what it means to become a bar bat mitzvah. But these days, a lot of kids and a lot of their parents are taking on the responsibility of learning to read Torah, learning to chant from the Torah scroll, learning to lead prayers, And often, even if they don't do that, they'll say something about that Torah portion that like on the date of their bar mitzvah. They learn about it so that they learn this story and they learn what it means to them. And then they share that and they teach the congregation, whoever is congregated there for them, about what's important to them.
I love this. So I had a client a couple years ago who was Jewish, and she would share with me some of the rituals and some of the ceremonies and the traditions and annual things. And I also appreciate about the culture how community and tribe oriented it is. Like even what you were just saying about that morning prayer can only be said in a group of 10. I don't know if you said 10 or 10 or
right.
more, 10 or more,
yeah.
Right? Because I mean, for anyone who believes in the power of prayer, multiplying the people saying the prayer, and that's a Bible thing. I'll misquote the verse. I don't know where it is, but it's something where like 2 or more gather, it's a more potent prayer. And if the point of mourning is to support not just your own healing, but the person in mourning, to go, hey, we can only do this if we're all going to do it together because it's going to be that much more powerful and effective. I just find that to be a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. And when you're going through such a hard time that you've lost someone close to you, you don't necessarily want to get up and go be a part of the community, right? But a lot of healing can happen there, and you can be supported by other people who have gone through that or who knew the person who passed away. And it just offers you that opportunity for healing and community and group.
It's so good. And, you know, another reason I'm glad we're having this conversation is because I think it's really easy, again, for anyone, regardless of what the religion was, anyone who was raised with religion, like you said, to throw the baby out with the bathwater, instead of going, there were still some really amazing elements there. Like, I will always light candles, you know? Like, I will always light candles, especially when something is, like, really important, or I'm saying a prayer for a person or whatever, setting an intention. Like, that's something, like, very Catholic to me. Like, you go to the place and you light the candles and you put in your dollar. And I'll always do it. And there's more things, too, but I love that. I mean, again, there's just some principles to me that feel old school, and like our culture that feels bankrupt is another word I could use. I feel like that's why. I feel like things are flat because people don't have these like beautiful ceremonial things to like enrich their lives when shit is really hard.
Yeah. I think also the Bible often gets a bad rap because it's quoted out of context and
all the time.
All the time quoted weaponized. And then people hear like this quote from the Bible and they're first of all angry that somebody's using that. And second of all, like they disagree with it. And they're like, why are you talking about the Bible? Why are you doing this? And it's just like made into this, it makes it that much more archaic. Like, don't talk to me about this. This is not relevant. Well, actually, if you would just stop quoting it, stop using it like it's your weapon, and spend more time learning it. Because the truth of the matter is, so in Judaism, they say that there's 613 commandments in the Torah. There is not one person who is living by all the commandments. There's just not. So like every single person who's quoting you something from the Bible, they're not doing another thing that it says that they're supposed to do in the Bible. Yeah. So like nobody here is living in glass, or everybody's living in glass houses. I forget what it is. Don't throw stones. However that saying goes, right? Like nobody here is perfect. And the Bible, like the Torah shows us that nobody then was perfect either. We're just not perfect. But so don't use it to say other people are doing the wrong thing. We know you're doing the wrong thing too. We're all just trying to do the best we can.
And this literally comes back to your first truth, which is this isn't about you and it is about me. And the part that is about you is you're taking responsibility for your response. And as well, something else we said earlier, which is during the donkey story, like, who cares?
Right.
Like, why are we getting caught up? Like, it's some people I believe do it intentionally, but I think a lot of people don't realize that they're honing in on the thing that doesn't actually matter is just an enormous distraction from the actual issue, from the actual progress or healing or whatever is trying to be made.
Right. Yeah. I just saw something on social media yesterday. It was really bothersome. There was like a clip of some guy harassing a woman because she was wearing a Puerto Rico shirt. And it was horrible. And he was like, go back to where you came from. And she's like, Puerto Rico is part of America. And the people commenting on this were saying how dumb this guy was because he didn't know Puerto Rico was a part of America. I'm like, you're missing the whole issue. It doesn't matter what she's wearing. Stop talking about her shirt. Doesn't matter where she's from. Like he can't talk about her shirt. You get so distracted talking about like whether Puerto Rico is part of America or not, whether that guy is dumb or not, and whether the donkey could actually talk or not. you're missing the gold.
Yeah.
And the important stuff. Yeah.
Big time. So this interview will come out before September. Will people be able to pre-order your book if they want to?
Absolutely. Yeah. They can just go to outoftheboxjudaism.com and pre-order, and I'd be happy to, have it available for them when it comes out.
Yay. And what I always like to ask people, is there anything I didn't ask you that you were really like wanting to talk about and we didn't get to it?
Oh, I don't know.
You know me because you listen
stories.
to the show.
I know.
So we bounce
I love
that you I love listening to stories. Do you have one more? You want to tell us another one, or are you storied out?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things about like a lot of people I meet these days are, looking to become more spiritual and have more thought-provoking things in their life, but they don't necessarily look to the Torah for that. So it's fine, right? So you might know this story about, it's a Taoist story of a man who had a horse. I'm going to tell it not exactly right, I think, but bear with me. This man had a horse, and he gave his horse to the sun, and the horse threw the son off the horse. And everybody came around and said, "Oh, this is such bad news. I'm so sorry." And the guy said, "Well, good news, bad news, who knows?" First he got the horse, and they said, "Such good news, you have the horse." And he said, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" And the horse threw his son off, and everybody said, "Oh, such bad news, your horse threw off the son. This is such bad news." And the guy said, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" And then the recruiters came around for the army, and they couldn't take the son because he had a broken leg. And they say, "Oh, you're so lucky they couldn't take your son because he had a broken leg." And the guy says, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" Right? And I clearly am not remembering this whole story, but hopefully the point is coming across. But
Yes.
One of the things that I like about this story is that you could look at the story of Joseph being sold into the well as the same story, right? So Joseph is tattletaling on his brothers, and they're sick of it, and they throw him into a well. Is this good news or bad news? Well, the well had no water. This is what it says in the Torah. I find this really fascinating. It says, the well was empty. There was no water in it. So people who study Torah will see that as redundant and say, why is there this redundancy? Okay, because if they say the well is empty, why are they also saying there was no water in it? If it was empty, there was nothing in it. So commentators say the reason why it says there's no water in it is because there were snakes in there. Okay, so it was empty of water, like you would expect a well to have water. This well had no water. Maybe it was the dry season, but there were snakes in there. Okay, so they threw Joseph into the well, and good news, bad news, who knows, right? But there was no water in it. Well, that's probably good news because he didn't drown, right? But it had snakes in it. So that might be bad news. Who knows? And then one of the brothers says, hey, let's not kill him. Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites instead. So they bring Joseph out and they sell him to the Ishmaelites. Is good news or bad news? I mean, who knows? The guy's alive, but now he's a slave, right? He goes down to Egypt and he becomes like the head of the household, right? But then the Pharaoh's wife, or Potiphar's wife, accuses him of sexual harassment, and he gets thrown into jail, which is actually called a bore in Hebrew, which is the same word from the original story when the brothers threw Joseph into a bore. And now the wife throws Joseph into a bore. Is this good news or bad news? Well, it seems bad to be in jail, right? But then he starts interpreting dreams in there. And it's this dream interpretation that gets him out and eventually gets him to be the number one guy to Pharaoh in Egypt. And then when the brothers come down to Egypt because there's no food in the land of Canaan, there's Joseph. They don't know yet that it's Joseph, but there's Joseph able to give them food because what? Because they threw him in a well, right? So you don't know. And the same thing is true, all the things that happen to us every single day, right? A year ago, I got a flat tire on the worst day possible. And I drove to where I was going and I came out and the same tire was flat again. I was like, is this good news? Is this bad news? Believe me, at the time, it really felt like bad news. I assure you, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, good, it felt terrible, right? But this happens to all of us all the time, that we're judgmental of the thing that happens, whereas really we don't know the end of the story yet. Is it good news? Is it bad news? I don't know. We can learn the same story from the one that I mistold from Taoist tradition. Or the one from Joseph, it's the same story.
Yeah. What I love about this is, and we also don't know, there's also so many times when we think we're done. We think the story is over. The story is not over.
Yeah.
Never close. This is one of the things when I've been mentoring women early on in their entrepreneur journeys. I avoided doing it for a while, but then I started doing it finally because enough people asked. And one of the things when people are so down on themselves, I don't have experience, who am I to do this? I kind of have them look back at all the good news, bad news things in the context of your story and go, you've actually been training for this your whole life in ways that you didn't realize. So I love that. And it, for me, that perspective makes everything worthwhile. Even the really, really, really hard stuff that sometimes we want to be like, why me?
And when we're in that why me moment and it really, really is hard, it feels really, really hard. It's still, it's not like we can be in that moment and go, oh, this is going to be all for the good.
No.
But no,
that's allowed.
It still feels really hard. Yeah.
But knowing that maybe someday it'll be the good news.
Right.
Hallelujah.
Right. Just stay really well meditated.
Stay really well meditated. I love it. We had all these callbacks. Esther, you're so great. I'm so glad you submitted that pitch application. So outoftheboxjudaism.com is where we're sending folks for you. They're checking out your books. It's just the 2 books, right? Just 2 books is not an enormous task.
Right. So I've written 5 books actually, but those are the 2 that are sort of on topic. I've written other children's books and then a book about reading for parents who have struggling readers. So I'm in the middle of another book right now. I tend to like to write. So when that ends up in a book, it's really rewarding.
That's awesome. You are prolific. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your stories, your generosity, your sense of humor. This was so, so fun.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been so excited about this for months. I can't believe I'm actually on your podcast. This has been amazing. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Well, I think inclusivity, what that does is it avoids tokenism.
Yes.
And diversity is part of it. So inclusivity is like the umbrella over it. So diversity is so I need a Black woman, I need an Asian woman, right. I need a man, because we want to have that, masculine voice. So it's like that. It's kind of just pick let's, put the pieces of the puzzle together. Where inclusivity is does this speak to people? Do people feel like they belong here in this conversation?